Good afternoon and welcome back to Introduce Investor Days. Next up we have G5 Entertainment, where the company's CFO Stefan Wikstrand is joining us to present the company. And with that said, please go ahead, Stefan.
Thank you very much. Glad to be, participating, not there, as I'm doing this from my house. As I said, my name is Stefan Wikstrand, so I'm the CFO of G5 Entertainment. So if we get going, I think we'll start with next slide 2, which is where we usually start. G5 Entertainment in brief. So for those of you that don't know us, we're a developer and publisher of free-to-play mobile games, so primarily for smartphone and tablets. Some of our games can be played on desktops as well. So Windows and Mac, but primarily it's a mobile gaming company, so focus on the tablets and smartphones. So we're a global company operating in a global market, a market that is over 70 billion USD large today. We operate through 7, one in Stockholm, one in San Francisco, where our CEO is based. We have an office in Malta, where COO is based, but the majority of the staff are in Russia and Ukraine. So we have around 400 people in Ukraine and 200 people in Russia, each country divided between two offices. So we are focused on a female audience of women over 35. So that's our core audience whom we make games for. We've started to release a lot of games the last year. So in 2019, we released 5 new games. And in 2020, we released so far 3 games and have 3 in the pipeline. So an exciting year for us. And we've been listing on NASDAQ in Stockholm since 2014. So next slide says that we will talk about the mobile gaming market and G5's development. So we skip to slide number 4. So this is obviously pre-COVID information about the global mobile gaming market. And we'll get back to the impacts of the pandemic in just 2 seconds. But before that, we could see a healthy growing business. Mobile gaming market was growing around, it's expected to grow around 11% the coming years. We see an increase of users, so the amount of players that we have in the ecosystem is definitely growing and is expected to grow as well. Asia is the biggest market, which it has been for a while. Slightly different for us. Our biggest market is North America, where we have around 55% of our revenue coming from North America. So if we then move to the next slide and the impact that we've seen from the pandemic, of course it's a tough spot where everyone's at and being at home and kind of having to change our everyday lives. Mobile gaming though is there to provide entertainment for people. Mobile gaming or gaming in general is a very cheap form of entertainment. And that is what we provide to our players. And that is something that we see a need for in these days. As you can see on the charts that you have on the slide, we've seen a massive increase in downloads ending of Q1. So the numbers there are quarterly, but lockdown started to take effect especially on the second half of Q1. So we've seen a massive increase in downloads. And that has been on all markets. If you look at if you adjust for time over when you reached a specific amount of cases, I think the report that we're citing here, they looked at the 200 confirmed case of COVID-19, and all markets show the same trend, that the downloads are increasing quite massively. We've seen a similar trend. So in later part of Q1, as I said, we're primarily based or primarily revenue is coming from North America. So we were a bit later in the cycle than other companies might have been. We saw the trend early in China, for example, but for us as a company, the the major effect took place in kind of the second half of March, where we saw a 50% increase week over week in downloads. So obviously a massive increase. That continued into April, and we also saw an increasing engagement from the users through April and the beginning of May as well. So we are definitely benefiting from this situation and providing a product that people are looking for at these kind of troubling days. If we move to slide 6, we go back to kind of more general what we've done the last few years to kind of address this market growth that we see. So from 2017 up until today, we've invested quite heavily in our staff. So we've increased the number of people we have employed in the company from 17 up until the latter part of 2019. So you can see that it starts flattening out in Q1 20. So we're starting to reach a level where we feel comfortable that we can support the games that we have and then also develop new ones and take them to the market. From this investment, we can see that the growth of own games is starting to come. So if you look at the own revenue that you have on the right-hand side, you can see a growth over time. You see a jump in 2018, which is related to the purchase of Secret Society. That gives an effect there. But from Q2 and the releases made there, you can see a definite growth in the own games over Q3, Q4, and Q1. So we're starting to get some payback on the investments that we made previously. So if we move to slide 7, it will say that we'll talk about the life cycle and the portfolio. So we'll jump to slide number 8. So as I said, we focus on a target audience of women over 35. It's still an underserved audience, so not a lot of companies that focus primarily on this demographic of users. We've been doing that for quite some time and have developed quite a know-how about how they operate and what they like in the games. It's a growing demographic. They are very loyal when they start playing the games, and they're also very strong payers in the game. So a very good audience for us to work towards. We do that with 4 game genres. I will start with the smallest and the newest one, which is the wordplay, which is only built up that genre of wordplay, Exercise Your Brain, that we released in Q4. A very casual gaming experience, which is like a crossword puzzle, you could say. Very nice to spend your time on. Easygoing game. Our next category is match 3 games, which is the kind of second newest that we have, but we've been in match 3 for quite some while. Match 3 is definitely something different. Match 3 is a huge subset of the market, worth probably 6-7 billion USD on a normal day. Now in COVID, obviously a bit more, probably. So match 3 games you probably all tried a match 3 game from time to time. Here represented by a game, Jewels of Rome, that were released in Q2 last year in 19, and that's been growing ever since. So a very strong title. It's kind of a combination of you build up a historic city in the ancient Rome, and by doing that you play match 3 levels. But it seems to be very competitive in the market, works really well, and people enjoy playing the game. We also know that match 3 in general is a genre that fits really well with our target audience, and is a genre where we probably invest the most currently, and we release a lot of titles in that specific genre. We have the Mahjong Solitaire genre, which we've had for quite some time. Mahjong it's based on the ancient game of Mahjong, so a puzzle game or a match 2 game. Also very, very casual, but very nice kind of playing experience. Nowadays not our biggest genre, but we continue to kind of invest in those games. Our biggest genre is hidden object games, and it's a genre that has been with us ever since moving into mobile gaming in 2009. Here represented by our game Homicide Squad, which is a crime-based game, but our biggest game is Hidden City, a licensed game. So hidden object is a very distinct genre. It's not as competitive as match 3, but then also a bit smaller as a niche. We are one of 3 or 4 kind of main players in the hidden object genre, and serves us really well. Also fits really well with the target audience, and is an area that we kind of continue to invest in as well. An important genre for the company. All of this is kind of built together through the G5 Friends network that we have built in all of our games. G5 Friends is a social network where people can build friends, they can chat and interact, and they can also give each other gifts to get ahead in the game. So helps them forward in their gaming experience, also provide a social element to the gaming. For us, it's obviously a retention tool. We get touch points with end users that we can use, both in terms of marketing or re-engagement campaign, but also cross-selling. For the users, they also have the benefit that they can play on multiple devices. So they can play on the phone and then switch to the tablet when they come home, for example. Or if they lose the device, they obviously have the ability to kind of recover where they were in the game, which is important. If we skip on to the next slide 9. I talked a bit about this on the previous slide regarding the investments that we made in the workforce. But we've spent a lot of energy, so that's why we reiterate as well that we have strengthened the development teams. We focus a lot more on the own games in the portfolio and released a lot of own games. And with the increased capacity that we have internally, we also rely less on external development. So we have better control and can be a bit tougher on quality and working more actively with the portfolio of games. Having all this resource and all the games that we release now, we also start to prune the portfolio more actively. So we are tougher on the underperforming games and making sure that we quickly stop developing them. So that we can move on to games that show growth potential. That happened to the game Solitaire Tour, which we canceled during autumn, which was a fairly new game for us, but didn't show the potential that we wanted to see. And therefore, we decided to discontinue the development of the game. So that's a part of kind of running the portfolio of games. So in Q2, you can see that the revenue from own games have grown. We continue to grow, and own games is now more than 45% of revenue, and has a very nice trend on that curve. Jewels of Rome, that I mentioned before, is now our second largest game, and quickly became the second largest game after launch, and has grown month to month ever since launch, maybe with the exception of February, but otherwise very kind of strong sequential growth development since launch. So a successful title for us. And as I said, we released 5 games in 2019, one of which was Jewels of Rome. In Q2, we also released Matchtown Makeover, and that was released in test markets, but is now released for a global audience since a few weeks back. We also released 3 games in Q4 that show good KPIs. We have continued with this. So in 2020, we have released an additional 3 games, and expect to release 3 more as well during the year. So we have a lot of activity, and you can see that in the games portfolio chart as well that we have there in the bottom. So we have the part of the portfolio where we don't have any development teams attached to the games, which is called harvest mode. I'll get back to that in a minute. But we don't spend that much resource on the game, we don't market them, but we essentially just bring in the long tail revenue from the games. We have active games in the portfolio, which is games that are active in the market, and we have a development team attached to the games, and they're kind of in full production with a full production in the market. So that would be Hidden City, Secret Society, Mahjong Journey, for example, Jewels of Rome. And then we have the in development category here, which you can see is quite large compared to the other ones. And those are the games that are recently launched. So in one sense, they are in soft launch, or they are in the pipeline to be released. So that is the split that we have. If we then move on to slide 10, we have a chart that we always have in our presentations just to describe the lifetime revenue curve of a free-to-play game. If we start left to right, then obviously you need to develop a mobile game. You take that to the market in something called soft launch. where you review the KPIs of the game. You get an audience in that starts playing it, where you can test around. And in this period as well, you build out the content in the game, so it's big enough to have a good lifetime value of the users that come into the game. When everything plays out as it should, and the KPIs are strong enough, you start scaling the game with marketing. And that continues for, well, as long as you can, until the game eventually reaches its peak revenue, which it does at some point. After that, you have an initial churn of users, described here in the kind of first phase of the long tail revenue. And then the curve flattens out, and it's very sticky revenue base, where you have a loyal user base that come back to the game and play that for a very, very long period of time. And that long tail revenue is with the company for years. Then we have harvest mode here. Long tail revenue and harvest mode have a lot of similar characteristics. For us, the classification is primarily just if we have a development team attached to the game or not, and if we do marketing on the game. So if the game has a large enough revenue base, we will continue to sustain the revenue, the long tail revenue, with an own development team. Whilst if it declines too much, we will cut the development team and just take in the long tail revenue through the harvest mode. It will drop a bit quicker, but the profitability is much better. On this chart as well, you see the dotted line, which should represent marketing in this instance. And the area between them would then be some sort of contribution one from the game. And as you can see, the majority of the profits come in the latter part of the game's lifetime as marketing efforts comes down. So it becomes very profitable. If we move to the next slide, we will see the current product matrix that we have. So here you will see, if we start in the bottom right corner, you have the small cash cows, which is essentially the harvest mode games, where they are a bit smaller. They don't have a development team attached to them, as I said, but bring in a nice cash flow every month. Then we have the big cash cows, which is more the long-term revenue that we discussed. So we have Hidden City is our biggest game, but in that category of games, we have also Pirates and Pearls, Secret Society, Mahjong Journey, for example, where we actively work with the games to develop them and market them. But they're not the kind of growth stars that you want to see in the portfolio as well. But very important part, and bring in a lot of revenue every month and have a very nice profitability on these games. So the big cash cows. We then go down to the left corner. We have the new releases. So as I said, we've released a lot of games lately. I think we're even missing one game here. We just released Crime Mistress LA. Should be there. We have Hawaii Match 3 recently released. So all these are kind of games where we have them in the market. We're looking into the KPIs that they will achieve, and hopefully we will be able to tweak the game so that it's profitable to market them and really scale the games hard. And then we have the current stars that we have in the portfolio. So Jewels of Rome, I mentioned Jewels of Rome before. Obviously a very strong game, released in Q2, already second largest in the portfolio and continue to grow. So definitely a growth star. We have Homicide Squad, is growing, but seems to be tilting more towards the kind of cash cow situation. And then we have Jewels of Mahjong and Hidden Treasures here. But I would say that this is kind of a cluster of games that we released in Q4 where they look really promising. But in a few months, we will know more and talk about that if they definitely moved into the star category. If we go to the next slide 12, I will not spend that much time on this one. It's the biggest game by revenue on Windows the last 7 days. This is a list that you can find on our site. So if you're interested in seeing kind of how that develops, you're more than welcome to go into g5e.com. And you can find the top charts for each platform. I think what's interesting for this one on the last 7 days, obviously Hidden City, our biggest game. Jewels of Rome is our second biggest game. But interestingly, on place 4, you see Jewels of the Wild West already now, so short after release. So that's has had a very strong performance on the Windows platform. If we then go to the next slide, we're going to talk just briefly about the financials. I see that I'm kind of pushing my time limits in just a second. So we can skip to revenue. Yeah, exactly. Your revenue up there. So if we look at Q1, we had revenues of 312 million, which is a slight increase compared to last year. Year over year, we have a slight benefit of FX on the revenue line. So more or less flattish compared to last year, a slight drop in sequential revenue from Q4. What's positive here, though, is that you can see that the own games continue to grow. So we saw an 8% growth sequentially from Q4 to Q1. Jules Rome continued what we said when we closed Q4. It had 15% of revenue, has sustained that growing quarter. So in all, a very positive development, even though the total top line is impacted by both licensed and own games. But the own games underlying is very nice growth sequentially. If we move to the EBIT, EBIT is very happy about that, obviously, coming back to very healthy margins. On the chart here, it looks like EBIT margin was over 12%. We had a very large impact from FX, which was around 3 percentage points. So in reality, the underlying kind of EBIT margin was a bit over 9% if you adjust for FX, but still very strong, coming back from Q3 and Q4 where we had a bit weaker margin. And we have working really hard on working more efficiently within the user acquisition, marketing efforts, and that we started to see effects from in Q1. So the user acquisition costs came down to 22% of revenue, which is a huge difference compared to Q3 and Q4, obviously. If we move on to the next slide, which is cash and cash flow, we ended the quarter with the absolute highest cash position that we've had so far, so over 185 million. The quarter wasn't special in any way. It was rather a fairly stable quarter where we had a cash conversion more or less in line with the profitability of the company, which is what you should expect. But our cash flow can be a bit volatile between the quarters because we have with just a few stores that pay us, and we have a few suppliers that are quite large. So it can be a bit volatile. So this was a very stable quarter. There are no kind of significant movements in net cap either. So we have a rather steady rate between capitalization and amortization. So if we move to the next one, I'm going to wrap this up. It's very special presenting in a video format like this. But as I said, we have a very strong balance sheet. We had our highest cash position ever, and we don't have any debt on the balance sheet either. So a very strong balance sheet. The wholly owned games of G5 are very promising. The share of owned games has grown over the last many quarters, and seem to continue going in that way. Jules Rome, very popular, has had a fantastic start, and we've had a bunch of new games coming in Q2. So we have a lot of shots on goal, so to say, that can fuel us going forward. Hidden City remains very popular, so a very large revenue base and very profitable in its more kind of later stage in life. Very popular, very loyal audience that we continue to work very actively with. And as I said, the development teams that we've invested in, obviously core for the company to have strong development. And we built up this capacity, and we really start to see the benefits from that now with all the releases coming to the market. So all in all, a very, very strong and healthy position for G5. And I will leave you there and see if we have any questions.
Yes, thank you, Stefan. First off, you mentioned earlier in your presentation that you've seen quite a significant increase in app downloads on Google Play and App Store, and also that you've seen a similar trend for G5. But I was wondering if you could say anything about like the quality of the users. Are they the same as you would expect, or is there a difference compared to what you usually see in terms of perhaps lifetime value or other measurements like that?
Well, we don't usually comment the granularity in that sense, and it is a very kind of unprecedented situation. So it's hard to also. I don't think we want to kind of run too much with what we see currently. And, obviously it could reverse quite quickly. Lockdowns are eased up and summer is coming. And then all of a sudden you have a large inflow of users that have looked really good. So you think, whoa, metrics are really strong, or they didn't, but and then they leave you over summer. So then what was the lifetime value of that users in reality? So we don't want to kind of run too hard with what we see, but we definitely see, as we said, we see increased engagement. People want to download the games, they want to play the games. And then we'll see how this kind of plays out over time, and both on a kind of an individual gamer's basis, so the lifetime value that you talk about, but also kind of on the total level for the company.
I think we have time for just one more question, but as you highlighted in the presentation, you've built up quite a sizable cash position, and you mentioned investing further in the workforce and so forth. But what are some other areas where you could see need for investment outside of the workforce and obviously new games? Are there anything you're looking specifically at?
No, but we obviously have a large cash position, and well, we have the dividend coming up, and we're very keen on paying back money to our shareholders. We've been repurchasing some shares lately, so that is also something that we've spent some money on. But we want to have the flexibility as well to take advantage of opportunity when it arises. But the majority is plowed into kind of development of games, and that's what we essentially do. I think obviously there's more avenues, but as we've said before, we're a mobile gaming company at heart. We're not primarily an M&A company that is looking to do that type of activity. Of course, we're looking around, and we wouldn't shy away if a nice opportunity fell in our laps, but our focus is on the games and kind of building them out and investing there.
All right, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you, Stefan, for joining us today and presenting the company.
Thank you.
Bye.